The Apostle Paul once wrote something that feels deeply personal to anyone who has ever felt trapped by their own thoughts. In his second letter to the Corinthians, he says that the weapons we fight with are not the weapons of the world. He says they have divine power to demolish strongholds. But what happens when that stronghold isn't a physical place? What happens when the hardest battle you fight all day isn't at your job or in your family, but in the absolute quiet of your own mind? Perhaps you know exactly what this feels like. You wake up exhausted, not because your body didn't get enough sleep, but because your mind was running long before your feet even touched the floor. You carry a silent weight that no one around you can see. There is this invisible opposition, a heavy, anxious whisper that paints worst-case scenarios when you are just trying to find a single moment of peace. We often look for spiritual warfare in the visible, dramatic moments of life. We expect it to be loud. But the enemy's most effective strategy is much quieter. It begins before the actual conflict even arrives. It begins with a single unguarded thought, a slow, subtle erosion of your hope. If you have been feeling this unexplainable heaviness lately, if you are fighting a silent war right now that you haven't been able to explain to anyone, not even to the people you love, I want you to stay here with me for a moment. You are deeply understood. You are not losing your mind. And more importantly, you are not unprotected. In the book of Proverbs, chapter 4, verse 23, there is an instruction that sounds simple but is incredibly profound. Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. In the biblical context, the heart isn't just about fragile feelings. It is the center of your intellect, your thoughts, and your will. It is the control room of your life. Notice that the writer doesn't say, guard your circumstances, or guard your finances, or guard your reputation. He says to guard your inner world above everything else. Why? Because the enemy of your soul knows that if he can capture your mind, he can dictate your reality. The battle doesn't have to defeat you physically if it can defeat you mentally first. The battle for your mind is exactly what Jesus addressed in his parables, not on the surface, but in the hidden layer underneath. The specific practical truths about how to guard your inner world, silence the anxious whisper, and stop the enemy at the door of your thoughts. Most people read those parables for decades without ever finding what's inside them. That breakthrough is in the first pinned comment just below this video. There is an exclusive bonus waiting for you there. Scroll down, click the link right now. The answer to this silent war you've been fighting is there. When we are emotionally tired, when we have been grieving a painful loss and carrying the silent weight of family problems or dealing with chronic anxiety, our spiritual immune system drops. We become vulnerable. Have you ever noticed that the darkest thoughts, the heaviest doubts, and the most intense fears always seem to visit you when you are already exhausted? Late at night, when the house is quiet, or in those lonely hours of the early morning, The spiritual battle rarely begins with a sudden catastrophe. It begins with a suggestion, a subtle, quiet whisper that says, "Things will never get better." Or, "You are completely alone in this." Or, "God has forgotten you. Otherwise, you wouldn't be suffering like this." Perhaps you have been listening to those whispers for so long that you have started to believe they are your own thoughts. You have learned to function while carrying a profound sadness. You go to work, you take care of your responsibilities, you smile when you need to smile, but inside, there is a storm that never seems to pass. You have learned to survive, but surviving is not the same as having peace. I want to gently remind you today that just because a thought crosses your mind, it doesn't mean it belongs to you. It doesn't mean it is the truth. You do not have to offer a seat at your table to every anxiety that knocks on your door. Lord Jesus, for the one listening right now who is profoundly tired of fighting their own mind, I ask for a sudden, comforting peace. Wrap your presence around their exhausted thoughts. Calm the storm inside their chest. Give them the grace to stop fighting the ghosts of the past and the fears of the future, and let them simply rest in the safety of your hands today. One of the most painful aspects of emotional exhaustion is the profound sense of isolation it brings. When you are fighting an invisible battle, it is incredibly easy to believe that no one else understands. You look around and everyone else seems to be handling life perfectly. But the truth is, the enemy always tries to isolate you before he attacks you. Look at the story of the prophet Elijah in the first book of Kings, chapter 19. He was a man of immense faith. Yet, after a period of intense spiritual conflict, he received a threat that broke him. He ran far away into the wilderness, sat down under a solitary broom tree, and prayed a deeply honest prayer. He said, "I have had enough, Lord. Take my life." Have you ever felt the weight of that prayer? Perhaps not wanting your life to end, but desperately wanting the struggle to stop. Have you ever closed your eyes and whispered, "I have had enough. I am tired of being the strong one. I am tired of holding everything together for everyone else, while my own world feels like it is falling apart"? Elijah wasn't suffering from a lack of faith. He was suffering from profound emotional and physical burnout. The enemy used his exhaustion to make him believe a specific lie. "I am the only one left. I am completely alone." But look closely at how God responds to a broken, exhausted person. He doesn't preach a loud, correcting sermon. He doesn't demand that Elijah immediately get back up and fight. He doesn't condemn him for feeling weak. The scripture says God sent an angel to touch him gently. He provided him with warm bread and water, and he let him sleep. And later, when God finally spoke to him, it was not in a violent wind, nor in an earthquake, nor in a fire. God spoke in a gentle, quiet whisper. Protecting your mind sometimes looks exactly like this. It is recognizing the limits of your own humanity. It is acknowledging that you cannot fix everything and control every outcome. The battle around you is already loud enough. You do not need to add the heavy burden of self-condemnation to it. Your weariness is not a failure of faith. It is simply a sign that you are a human being who has been carrying too much for too long, and that you desperately need the quiet, sheltering whisper of the Most High. Your weariness is not a failure of faith, and the answers you've been searching for in that exhaustion are closer than you think. Jesus encoded 10 specific, practical truths in his parables for people in exactly this place. The people who found those truths stopped surviving and started living differently in their relationships, their peace, their finances. If you haven't clicked the first pinned comment yet, that exclusive bonus is still there. Scroll down. Click the link. What's waiting there is the missing piece this silent war has been keeping you from. In his letter to the Ephesians, chapter 6, the Apostle Paul gives us a powerful image of this unseen conflict. He speaks of taking up the shield of faith to extinguish the flaming arrows of the evil one. When you are walking through a season of heavy emotional and spiritual opposition, the enemy rarely attacks you with things you don't care about. He targets the very things you cherish most. He targets your children, your security, your sense of purpose, your peace. And he does this by shooting these flaming arrows directly into your thoughts. Think about how a flaming arrow functioned in ancient warfare. Its primary purpose wasn't just to pierce a target. It was meant to start a fire. It was designed to cause widespread panic and confusion. When an anxious thought suddenly hits your mind out of nowhere, when a terrifying fear about tomorrow grips your chest, or when a sudden wave of inadequacy washes over you, that is a flaming arrow. It is designed to create a fire of panic in your inner world. But notice another profound instruction Paul gives in Romans 12:2. Be transformed by the renewing of your mind. He doesn't tell us to empty our minds. He doesn't tell us to distract our minds. He tells us to renew them. When we are emotionally overwhelmed, we often try to protect our minds by running away from our own thoughts. We look for distractions. We fill every silent moment with noise. We stay busy until our bodies drop from sheer exhaustion, just so we don't have to face the quiet. Because the quiet is where the arrows land. The quiet is where the battle happens. But avoiding the battle is not the same as being protected from it. To renew your mind is to gently but firmly interrupt the cycle of fear. It is the quiet discipline of recognizing that a thought is just an arrow, and you have the authority to refuse to let it burn down your peace. You don't have to possess the strength of a warrior today. You don't have to fight a massive, dramatic spiritual war. You simply have to protect the territory of your mind, one small thought at a time. When the lie whispers that you will not survive this season, you do not need to argue with it. You simply anchor your weary mind to an ancient, steady truth, and you let the arrow extinguish against the shield of God's unchanging nature. In the book of Exodus, chapter 14, there is a moment of profound human panic. The Israelites are standing before the absolute barrier of the Red Sea. Behind them is an army marching rapidly to destroy them. They are trapped between an impossible obstacle and a terrifying enemy. Their minds are immediately flooded with the worst possible outcomes. And in the middle of that overwhelming anxiety, the instruction given to them in verse 14 is breathtakingly simple. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. Notice the posture required for their protection. It wasn't preparation for combat. It was stillness. When we are facing our own silent battles, when the future feels uncertain, when a relationship is fracturing, or when we are simply crushed by the weight of daily survival, our natural response is to try to outthink the problem. We stay awake late into the night, replaying old conversations, calculating risks, and trying to construct a mental plan to save ourselves. We secretly believe that if we just worry enough, if we just strategize enough, we can somehow maintain control over the chaos. But worry is simply the illusion of control. It is an exhausting treadmill that completely drains your spirit while keeping you entirely in the same place. True spiritual protection often requires us to surrender the very thing we cling to the most, our desperate need to figure everything out. Protecting your mind means accepting that you do not have to have all the answers right now. The psalmist writes beautifully in Psalm 91, "Whoever dwells in the shelter of the Most High will rest in the shadow of the Almighty." Spiritual protection is not just a shield you have to tirelessly hold up with your own strength. It is a place you inhabit. It is a quiet, steady resignation that says, "I cannot fix this. I cannot control the outcome of this situation, but I know the one who holds the outcome." Perhaps the greatest, most powerful spiritual warfare you can engage in today is simply refusing to panic. It is the quiet act of taking a deep breath, stepping back from the edge of your anxiety and allowing your mind to rest. You are not responsible for parting the heavy waters in front of you. You are only responsible for being still and letting God be God. In his letter to the Philippians, chapter 4, the Apostle Paul offers a profoundly comforting promise. He writes, "And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus." I want you to look closely at that specific word, guard. In the original language, this is a military term. It means to set up a garrison, to place a military watch over a fragile city to protect it from a hostile invasion. When you are emotionally drained, when your reserves are empty, God does not ask you to stand at the heavy gates of your mind and fight off every dark thought on your own. He knows you are simply too tired for that. He knows that sometimes just getting out of bed requires a monumental amount of courage. Instead of asking you to be a warrior in your weakest moments, he offers his own peace to stand guard over you. But how do we allow this peace to take its place? It is not by pretending everything is fine. It is not by burying our pain or putting on a brave face so that others won't worry. The verses just before this promise give us the gentle, simple key. In every situation, by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. This means bringing your raw, unfiltered, exhausted self to Him. You don't need eloquent words. You don't need to present a perfect spiritual posture. Sometimes the most powerful and authentic prayer a human being can pray is just a quiet whisper. Lord, I am carrying too much. My mind is heavy and I need you to hold this for me. When you finally surrender your heavy burdens, when you stop trying to manage the invisible opposition using your own limited strength, something silent and beautiful happens. The peace that transcends human logic steps in. It doesn't mean the external storm instantly disappears. The difficult circumstances might still be there tomorrow. The grief might still ache, but inside, in the deepest chambers of your mind, a quiet strength begins to rise, a gentle reassurance that you are safely held, that you are deeply loved, and that this current darkness is absolutely not the end of your story. You are guarded by a peace that the world did not give you, and therefore the world cannot take away. We have been talking about the quiet, heavy battles that happen in the unseen spaces of your life. And if you are still here with me at the end of this video, I know it is because you understand this silent struggle. You know exactly what it feels like to be exhausted by your own thoughts. I want to invite you to subscribe to our channel and walk with us every day. You don't have to carry the weight of these battles alone. The reason the enemy fights so hard to keep you in a state of emotional turmoil is because he knows exactly what happens when your mind is finally at rest. He knows that a calm, anchored mind is completely immune to his manipulation. He wants you endlessly distracted by the noise of worry, paralyzed by the fear of tomorrow, and convinced that the heavy cloud over your life will never lift. But I am here to tell you that this cloud is not permanent. The silent opposition you are facing right now, the sudden anxieties, the unexplained emotional weariness, the feeling that you are constantly pushing against an invisible wall, these are not signs that you have done something wrong. And they certainly are not signs that God has walked away from you. Often, the spiritual resistance in your life is a direct indication of the immense value of what you are carrying. The enemy does not waste his flaming arrows on someone who has no purpose. A thief does not try to break into an empty house. You are facing this battle precisely because there is something deeply valuable inside of you that hell is trying to stop. Your pain is real and your exhaustion is valid. But it is not the final chapter. The very fact that you are still here, still listening, still quietly looking toward the Lord in the middle of your weariness, is undeniable proof that the grace holding you is far stronger than the opposition fighting you. There is just one final truth we need to anchor in your heart before we finish. One profound realization that changes the entire landscape of this unseen war. We started this conversation by talking about the silent war, the unseen conflict that happens before any visible battle ever begins. The profound truth is, you cannot control every storm that approaches your life. You cannot control the actions of others, the unexpected losses, or the challenges tomorrow might bring. But you absolutely have the authority to decide who gets to speak in the quietest rooms of your mind. When you intentionally choose to guard your heart, you are not denying the reality of your pain. You are simply denying the enemy the right to use that pain to destroy you. You are quietly taking back the territory of your thoughts. The greatest victory in spiritual warfare is rarely loud. It doesn't always look like a dramatic rescue or a sudden miracle. Most of the time, it looks like a person who has every logical reason to break down, choosing instead to close their eyes, take a slow, deep breath, and trust the quiet presence of God. It looks like a mind that was once an exhausted battlefield, slowly transforming into a sanctuary of peace. You do not have to fight the darkness by shouting at it. You fight the darkness simply by turning on the light. Let the unchanging truth of God be that gentle light in your mind today. Rest in the profound assurance that your life is safely hidden in Him. He is your shield. He is your hiding place, and He is fighting for you. Even in those moments when you feel entirely too tired to stand. The battle is not yours to win. The peace is yours to keep. If these words brought a moment of quiet to your mind today, I want to ask you to do something simple. Share this video with 5 people in your life. You never know who is secretly exhausted and desperately needs to hear that they are not fighting alone. Please leave a sincere comment below. Tell me what part of this reflection spoke to your heart the most, and suggest a theme or a silent struggle you would like us to talk about in our next video. We are building a community of healing here, and your voice matters deeply to me. Subscribe to the channel so we can continue this journey together. May the deep, unshakable peace of God guard your heart and your mind today.